New York Jets general manager Joe Douglas. Love him or hate him, you're probably wrong. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio, JetNation.com. Be sure to check us out on JetNation.com. Log in and join what is the most active Jets message board on the web. So Joe Douglas's name keeps coming up. Fans can't stop talking about whether or not the Jets have a general manager who can draft or who can't draft. And I touched on this a few weeks ago in a different video, but I was going to go a little bit more in depth today because this topic seems to be ongoing. And for some reason, a little bit of delusion here. Whether you love Joe Douglas, in which case, as I said at the top, you're probably wrong if you love the guy and think he's great. But you're just as wrong if you think he's terrible and he can't draft. The fact of the matter is, the reality is, the jury is still out on Joe Douglas and a lot of his draft picks. And as I said previously, in the previous Joe Douglas video, a lot of this will come down to how fans view the GM's level of responsibility in players getting injured. Me personally, I said it before, I'll say it again. If the guy has no significant injury history in college, I'm not pinning it on the GM when a guy gets hurt in the pros. It is projecting players is hard enough as it is without looking at a GM and saying, I need you to look into your crystal ball and tell me if Cam Clark is going to get a spine injury. I need you to look into your crystal ball and tell me if somebody's going to roll up on Mekhi Becton's leg. I need you to look into your crystal ball and tell me how Denzel Mims' hamstrings are going to hold up during his first camp. All right? Oh, Mims was hurt in college. Yeah, he had a hand injury. Guys get dinged up. How much time did these guys miss? Were they reliable? Did they appear in 85, 90% of their games? To me, that's not an injury-prone guy. Jabari Zuniga, a pick I didn't like, a guy who's probably not going to pan out. People tell him, oh, he was hurt. Zuniga had injuries. Look at his history. Zuniga was fine until his final year in college when he had an ankle injury, and it would appear he was put back in action too soon because he re-injured the same ankle when he was put in that game, which is what we saw last year with Mekhi Becton. He injured his shoulder. His head coach was an idiot, so they put him back in too soon, re-injured the same shoulder, missed more time. And some people may say I'm a hypocrite about this because just a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, I was saying it is time to start worrying about Mekhi Becton's durability, which to a degree it certainly is, based solely on the number of games he has missed. But in being fair to Mekhi Becton, having a guy roll up on the back of your leg isn't something you can control. It has nothing to do with his weight. I still see people saying we knew he was going to be injury prone because of his weight. He's not had a single issue related to his weight. So that's sort of a, that's a point being made that doesn't make sense. I think it's people who expected him to get injured because of his weight, so they're attributing any injury, weight related or not, to his weight. It makes no sense. So Joe Douglas is a guy who has come in here. He's had 2 drafts. One of those classes hasn't yet played a half. They have yet to play one half of an NFL season. And yet there are people saying, well, Joe Douglas can't draft. Joe Douglas can't draft. So I'm looking at it this way. If we can completely disregard and throw out all of his players who have not yet shown starting potential in the NFL in a matter of 5 or 6 games, then certainly we should be able to say whether or not a player is a boom or a bust. After 5 or 6 games, which seems absurd, but I guess I'm kind of countering an absurd argument. And again, that being, oh, Joe Douglas can't draft. 2 draft classes, ton of injuries beyond his control, and whether it's we've seen LaMichael Pirine miss time, we've seen Denzel Mims miss time, we've seen Mekhi Becton miss time, we've seen Ashton Davis miss time, we've seen, again, Zuniga. Zuniga's a guy, it's almost a non-issue because he's not going to be around for long, at least in my estimation. I could be wrong. Maybe he goes on to be an all-time great. But looking at what I've seen thus far, I'm just not seeing it. But so what do we know about Joe Douglas thus far and the couple of draft classes he's had? So he took Mekhi Becton, and again, you want to blame him for the injuries? Go right ahead. I'm not going to do that. He took Mekhi Becton, who has played at a very high level. Mekhi Becton throws grown men around like no offensive lineman I've ever seen in my life. And if he can manage to avoid the freak injuries and continue to ascend as a player, Mekhi Becton's ceiling is Hall of Fame. All right? If he's healthy and continues to develop, Hall of Fame talent. I'm not saying he's going to the Hall of Fame. I'm saying Joe Douglas drafted a player who has shown on the football field very early on that he can be at the very least an elite player. Again, health being the one issue there. Denzel Mims. I don't want to hear, well, Denzel Mims is a bust because he can't get on the field. This is a Robert Saleh, Mike LaFleur issue. Denzel Mims can play. I saw it in college. I saw it last year as a rookie. And we haven't seen it this year. Although the few targets Mims has had, he's looked as good as any other receiver on the roster. For whatever reason, I don't know what Denzel Mims did. He is not playing, and you will not convince me that it is related to his ability to play football. Denzel Mims, whether it's with the Jets or somewhere else, is going to be a number 1 or 2 receiver at some point in his career. Hopefully it's with the Jets. Will it be? This we don't know. Ashton Davis didn't like the pick at the time. Hasn't played enough to say one way or the other what we think he'll be, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say he is going to be at the very least a backup safety. So you've got a starting left tackle, a starting wide receiver, a backup safety. Zuniga we've talked about. I think he's a wash. LaMichael Pirine, here's a guy who is basically, I've said this in a previous video, I'll say it again, his physical attributes, you go back, you look at his pro day combine type numbers, and his attributes were about as bad as you could look for the offense the Jets are going to run. Every single back the Jets had on their roster in camp had more prototypical attributes for what the Jets look to do on offense. LaMichael Pirine is not a fit. That's why even though he was active last week, he didn't touch the ball. He's a guy I don't see getting the ball very much unless we're talking blowout, which was last week he didn't see the ball, or if there are a slew of injuries, excuse me, and he ends up getting some carries. James Morgan, bad pick, no getting around it. Cam Clark, love the pick, love the value, love the tape. From in college, thought he was a starting type player. Eventually, Mel Kiper said as much on draft day. There were several outlets that said developmental guy could be a starting offensive lineman. Of course, spinal injury. You want to blame Joe Douglas for Cam Clark's spine? You go right ahead. I'm not going down that road. Joe Douglas doesn't have the crystal ball to see who is going to get injured when. Bryce Hall, starting corner. Looks very much like he's going to be a solid number 1 corner for Joe Douglas. And he was taken, of course, with the 158th overall pick in the 5th round. Punter Braden Mann, another guy who's hurt, but he'll be fine. He will be a good to very good punter. So what you've got out of Joe Douglas's first draft class is a guy who's proven he can be a starting left tackle, a guy who's proven he can be an upper end wide receiver, even if we want to downgrade Denzel Mims, let's say average starter. But I would bet money that he will be much better than just an average starter in the NFL. Showed it on film last year, getting nailed to the bench this year for whatever reason. Ashton Davis, you're talking backup safety. LaMichael Pirine will probably be a backup running back somewhere else. And then, of course, you've got Cam Clark. Inconclusive, you can't say starter potential, but we haven't seen him take a snap in the NFL yet, and who knows if we will. And then Bryce Hall, starting corner. So you're saying one draft class, you got a starting tackle, a starting receiver, a backup safety at worst, potential starting lineman, and a starting corner. So that's anywhere from sort of 3 to 5 guys who will be starter to backup material in one class. In what world does that equate to this guy can't draft? He had 9 picks and he only got 5 good players. Even if you want to say 4. Even if you want to say 4 good players. We've talked about this recently on the forums on JetNation.com. We've seen Bill Parcells. We've seen the previous 2 buffoon GMs, John Idzik, Mike McCagnon. We've seen these guys go into drafts with 10, 11, 12, 13 picks and come away with nothing. Come away with one slightly above average player. Maybe a Jason Ferguson. Maybe a Jason Fabini. You know, what was John Idzik? John Idzik, the Idzik 12. Dakota Dozier, who I liked for a long time, ended up starting for a couple years with the Vikings. Far from a high-end player. 12 picks. You got a Nunwa, couldn't stay healthy. Okay, so let's say you got a Nunwa and a low-end starting guard out of 12 picks. Joe Douglas appears to have found 3 to 4, maybe 5 players in his first class, and we're equating that to, this guy can't draft. And that's just his first draft. It's absurd to sit here and try to evaluate this year's class. But we're going to do that a little bit because a lot of people seem to be happy to throw away this year's class. Because remember, he can't draft. He can't draft. Joe Douglas can't pick. So we're not going to get into Zach Wilson. He's the quarterback. Every quarterback is going to take some time. He's shown the flashes that made him great in college. It's a shame he was dinged up the other day against the Patriots because he really had strung together a couple of good drives, made some nice throws, some of the college stuff, the improvisation, the backhanded flip to Carter on the scramble, the beautiful throw to Griffin to his left, going across his body. So he was doing some really good things, in that short time. Then he gets nicked up. But he's shown the flashes we expected. He's done a little bit of what we hope we'd see. But it's going to be a process with a kid out of a smaller school making the adjustment to the NFL. Next guy on the list, Elijah Vera Tucker. This guy's already playing at a Pro Bowl level. I mean, if you want to say you don't think this guy can be a Pro Bowler, then I don't know what you're watching. Because the guy has been fantastic. And it was for that reason the Jets traded up to get him. And when Becton and Vera Tucker are healthy, look out. That's going to be a hell of a combo. Now, I'm not sitting here saying Mekhi Becton's never going to get hurt again. I'm not saying he's the most durable guy. Like I said, I got into it on Twitter with some people a couple weeks ago because I said I thought that he was, the Jets need to be leery of how often he's been hurt. And people, don't give up on him. I'm not giving up on him. I'm literally saying Hall of Fame talent. However, I don't think it's unfair to say he's missed enough games that the Jets should kind of be like, we gotta keep a close eye on this because he's missed a lot of time. Freak injuries or not, some guys get a lot of freak injuries, and you reach a point where you say, whether it's a freak injury or a tissue injury, soft tissue injury, at some point enough of them and you have to move on. So they're not near the point of moving on from Mekhi Becton, but they are at a point where you got to look and say, what are we dealing with here? Okay, so once you have AVT and Becton side by side, that's going to be a lot of fun. Elijah Moore, kind of along the lines of Denzel Mims. Mims isn't playing, Moore is playing, but Moore's production isn't good. But don't tell me, you can't say anything about Moore because he hasn't done anything yet. He is consistently wide open, and that falls on the quarterback. If you've watched Elijah Moore in college and through his first handful of NFL games, his floor right now is good receiver. His ceiling is elite receiver. His ceiling is top 10, top 15. And if you can't see that, because when you wake up in the morning and look at the box score, there aren't big numbers there, so you think Elijah Moore can't play, I'm here to tell you you're wrong. So you've got AVT, you've got Moore. Again, Wilson, process. It's going to be a little while till we know if he's the real deal. Behind that, Michael Carter. No reason to believe Michael Carter will be any less than a good starting running back. Could be very good. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can make people miss. He hasn't looked great, but he hasn't looked terrible. You'd like to see him break a few more tackles. We haven't seen as much of that as I would have liked. But at the same time, he has done enough that you look at him and think he'll be a quality NFL running back at the very least. At the very least. Jamie Sherwood, what can we say? Incomplete. Played a few games. Didn't look great at middle linebacker in his first game as a middle linebacker in the NFL, transitioning from safety, and then he blows out an ACL. So you have no idea what you have in Jamie Sherwood. Michael Carter at corner has looked really good. Not great, not perfect, but for a rookie, making the adjustment, he's looked pretty good. So he's a guy who looks like he's going to be around for a little while as a slot corner. Jason Pinnock, we haven't seen. Hamza Nasruddin's been injured. He should be coming back pretty soon. Brandon Echols, he's been starting, getting a ton of reps. Has he looked great? No. Has he looked okay? Yeah. So what at this point, what would you say about him? Might be a, middle to, decent starting corner. Or even a backup, even a depth guy. And then Jonathan Marshall, who's only appeared in one game. So what would that give you? That would give you, again, Zach Wilson, question mark. AVT, playing at a Pro Bowl, all-pro type level. Elijah Moore, getting open the way you expect a Pro Bowler to, just not getting the targets. That's not on him. Michael Carter should be a solid running back for years to come. Michael Carter should be a decent DB for years to come. And then Brandon Echols, who's got a shot to hang around for a while. That's 5 more players. That's 10 players in 2 drafts. Several of whom, at least 3, if we're being honest, AVT, Elijah Moore, Mekhi Becton, who are playing at a very high level. Very high level. So I'm supposed to believe that because the team is playing poorly, that Joe Douglas can't draft. He's gotten himself 10 players in 2 years. And let's not forget, and again, don't say to me, Glenn, this is crazy. Why are you evaluating a draft class now? I'm evaluating it now for those who are discarding it now. If you can give up on a player after 6 or 7 games, then I can sure as hell offer an opinion on a guy after 6 or 7 games. I think it's equally absurd to do it, but I'm just playing along with those who feel like we know how good Joe Douglas can be, and that, and that we got another GM who can't draft. 4 or 5 contributing players you do that every year, and you're going to be among the best GMs in the league. And this is as not counting Zach Wilson. We're just kind of looking at him and say, you know what? Too early, shown flashes, might be the guy, might not. If Zach Wilson is the guy, along with AVT and Elijah Moore and Michael Carter, that is a hell of a class. So it seems that those who like Joe Douglas only want to talk about the hits, and those who hate Joe Douglas only want to talk about the misses. And don't give me... One of the worst things, it kind of invalidates any argument someone's going to make when they say, oh, well, those 3 or 4 guys fell in his lap. He picked them. Bright Hall fell in his lap. He was a top-rated corner, and he fell all the way to round 5. Yeah, you know what? He was a top-rated corner who also fell to round 3 and also to round 4. And the Jets didn't have the first pick in round 5. A lot of teams had a lot of chances to take that guy. And you know who did? Joe Douglas. So do you know who gets the credit? Joe Douglas. That being said, it looks as if this drafting safeties to play linebacker thing, at least early on, isn't looking so hot. Hamza Nasruddin didn't look great early on. Sherwood didn't look fantastic. And again, now his ACL is blown. So in terms of just drafting, I don't see how you come... Again, as I said, if you're someone who thinks Joe Douglas should know Mekhi Becton's going to get rolled up on, then fine. Go ahead and blame Joe Douglas for knowing that and still choosing Mekhi Becton despite knowing that injury was going to occur. I don't believe there's a way for a GM to know that these injuries are going to occur. So, if you think along those lines, I get it. Joe Douglas is a terrible GM because he should be able to predict injuries. In my mind, in the mind of anyone who doesn't believe a general manager should be able to predict injuries, what I see is a GM who has selected 9 or 10 very talented football players, 3 or 4 of whom could be elite football players. And he's done it in 2 drafts. And don't forget, when Joe Douglas arrived, this roster was a disaster. This was going to be a very long process, whether we like it or not. We don't. I know. I don't like it either. But it is what it is. Why do you think Joe Douglas refused to accept the Jets' job unless they were willing to give a 6th year? You don't often see GMs get a 6-year deal, let alone an inexperienced GM who's never done it before. So that would lead me to believe that Joe Douglas sat across from Christopher Johnson and said, your roster is trash. If you expect me to have any chance to realistically turn this thing around, a 4-year deal and a 5-year deal isn't going to do it. Because we're looking at 2 or 3 years before I can clear out what's here to import some talented players to start turning this thing around. So that's what Joe Douglas has done. If you want to point me to a GM who routinely hits on, who every year goes out and finds 6, 7, or 8 starters or contributing players, and that's why Joe Douglas is so terrible, because he's only found 9 or 10 guys in 2 classes. Again, take a look, folks. Posted it last week. The Parcells drafts, the Idzik drafts, the McCagnon drafts. Didn't matter how many picks they had, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Terrible. Hall of Fame head coach Bill Parcells. Love what he did for the organization, but as a guy who picked players, it was a disaster. He did have the nice 2000 draft when he had 4 ones and he hit on those. Great. Though that's sort of the one class that absolves him of, being considered being able to put him in that class with Idzik and McCagnon as a GM, as a head coach, he's the best the Jets have had in my lifetime. Can't take that away from him. But when it came to picking players, I mean, Dorian Boose, pardon me, trading down from 1 overall, passing on Orlando Pace, trading down again, passing on Walter Jones, 2 Hall of Fame left tackles, and you draft James Farrior, who spends 3 or 4 years with the team and then moves on, doesn't even see a second contract as a Jet. Pardon me. So, in terms of Joe Douglas and in terms of him drafting players, if you think he's the Messiah, you're wrong. He's had some bad misses. I mean, the middle chunk of last year's draft, and I'm only saying this because I said it on the day. This isn't Monday morning quarterbacking. Didn't understand the P. Ryan pick. Didn't understand the Ashton Davis pick. The Zuniga pick I warmed up to. Didn't love it. The Morgan pick I called, but I thought it would be round 6, which would have made it a bit easier to digest. But all in all, you've got 9 or 10 guys who should be regulars for the foreseeable future, and you did that in 2 drafts. I don't think people realize how uncommon that is. And here's to hoping that all these guys get healthy. Cam Clark, hopefully we can one day put him on the list of successful picks. But that'll do it for this one, folks. A little bit longer than usual, but I wanted to dig in on this. I wanted to go guy by guy, look at what they've done for now. As silly as it seems, it's a reaction to a lot of the silliness out there. So that'll do it for this one. We'll catch you next time. Like I said, be sure to check us out on JetNation.com. Join the most active Jets message board on the web. Have a good one, Jets fans.